what's up, guys? Welcome to the Walkshow podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. On today's show, we've got my friend Dillon Barr joining us from Colorado. Dillon is a friend of mine I met down in Podfest in Orlando, and he's just a really thoughtful and cool guy. I think you'll really enjoy the talk that we had. It kind of went in a variety of directions. As always, today's show is produced, the music and the artwork by Misha Zarins. Thanks again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Walkshow podcast. This is your host, Walker Neer. Today's show, we've got a special guest that I met in Orlando, Florida. He actually works for a company called the Self-Publishing School, and I had the opportunity to have a really great conversation with him down there about that business and just about kind of life in general, and I really wanted to have him on to have all of you guys meet him as well. And that man's name is Dillon Barr. Dillon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
Mr. Walker Neer.
For sure. It is my pleasure. So when I met Dillon, like I said, it was in Orlando and it was with the Self-Publishing School. So I've talked about Orlando a little bit on the show previously, but
Okay.
mostly it was a podcasting event, but this Self-Publishing School is all about how to write a book and publish it on your own, hence the very obvious name. And so while that's not maybe on its face directly related to podcasting, it turns out that a lot of podcasts are in service of a larger business or already existing business or whatever. And so in that kind of context, that Self-Publishing School angle makes a ton of sense. So just real quick, and as much as you do or don't want to talk about it, Dillon, how did you get started with the Self-Publishing School, or how long have you been with them?
I've been with Self-Publishing School since last October, and that was actually my second. We call them stages when we go to these speaking events, because Chandler Bolt, who started the company, he speaks up on stage, so we call it a fucking stage. Super blatant. But Orlando was the second time I was in Orlando. First one was LaunchCon. We went to people that were getting ready to launch some type of business. A lot of them podcasts. And the second one was PodFest. And part of me was kind of thinking, what the fuck are we doing here? everything else is for everyone's got their microphones that they're helping people, like different ways to video things, and we're talking to people about writing a book. But to your point, I think is the fact that a lot of people who want to start a business or a podcast, that book is the foot in the door approach for them. So it's like, hey, I'll be a best-selling author, which is what Self-Publishing School helps people do, become Amazon best-selling authors. Kind of that credibility piece, and then it pulls people into the podcast, or people are really successful having podcasts, such as yourself.
Oh,
and
right,
and then the book is on the back end of just like, hey, while you're on my podcast, check out my book. So it made sense when I was there, but I have just been following Chandler since he really started it, man. It's a weird story. When I was in college, I started a personal growth organization at Central Michigan University. It's this huge school. If you've never heard of it, I'm surprised. But we would help freshmen and sophomores, like, goal set. You're just coming from like a partier in high school. You're coming into college. You want to start setting goals, getting ready for the real world. We'd help them set goals, hold them accountable to those goals. We would do like mini TED Talks every Wednesday. And Chandler ended up coming up because he was dating a girl at the time that went to Central Michigan University. They worked together. He was living in South Carolina. He came up. It was just in this phase of, he's like, I'm thinking about dropping out of school. Came up here to see what everything, visit Rachel, see what this is about. And him and I talked the next day, and he told me about a business he was looking to start. And I'm like, well, that sounds great. Stay in contact. Let me know if you need anything. And I've just been following from afar ever since. And then they were looking for a position, and I applied.
Gotcha. Yeah, Chandler was definitely a very inspiring person. I went. I'll be honest. He did a presentation over a lunch period on the first day of the conference, and I 100% agreed to attend because it was a free lunch.
That's how we get you.
Yeah, 1 million. And then even when he started talking, I was like, oh, well, this makes sense if you have a business, but I don't, so I don't care. And yeah, man, by the halfway through his presentation, I had my little mind map out and was writing ideas out and was into it. And it's something I shared with you when I was there, and for my audience's sake, not to make it too dramatic or significant of a moment, but it was really interesting to me because it was something that when he started talking, like I just said, I wasn't interested, but I wasn't interested not just because I thought it was like a bad idea or something. It was more just that I thought, oh well, I don't have a book to write, or oh well, I don't have something that I want to, that I want to share. So this just doesn't appeal to me because I'm not qualified for it to appeal to me.
Mm.
And by the end of his presentation, and then even beyond that, by the end of talking with Dillon the next day, with you, the next day, um, it was something that I was really strongly considering, and something that I really thought was something that I could achieve or accomplish. And while it's something that I ultimately decided to hold off on at this point, I still kick it around all the time. Like, it hasn't left. I think it's a really interesting idea, and I think it's really cool, to kind of. I just think it's really neat whenever you can kind of flip it on its head when someone thinks they can't do something, and then you're like, yeah, but look, here's a really easy path to do it, and we've already had other people do it, so we know it works. You know what I mean? Like,
And not only on top
uh,
of that, but just the fact that people, some of the books people write about that do extremely well. I'm like, what the fuck? People want to know this stuff? It's like, and no offense to them, I want to help them get their word out there. I think it'd be
sure.
crazy. Like, deep seated like desire that I have is, everyone hears the quote, history was written by the victors. It's like,
Hmm.
man, well, what the hell? What if history could be written by anybody? Like someone that just wants to write a certain story to teach people. I believe we were talking about, just how to treat people in a customer service job, because it's something that you
Yeah.
do so well. It's like, who are we to say history, like future from now, doesn't need that? And just to put that
Right.
legacy, that stamp on it, and other people have done far better with far less.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, just a really cool idea, and I would urge anyone who's ever even thought about, kicked the idea around of writing a book. And this show isn't to necessarily just plug self-publishing school, but
self-publishingschool.com
there you
forward
go.
slash VIP with Dillon. If
Yeah, no,
no, but give it a look.
no, and for real, and I'll say it again at the in the closing of the show. I'll make sure and mention that, and then in the show notes we'll have links because, um, again, it's not like they're sponsoring me in any way. I just think it's legitimately a really good idea, and the people that I've encountered, at least, Dylan and the other folks that I'd spoken with when I was in Orlando, all just really genuine people. So I think it comes from a good place, and I think it's accomplishing a good thing. And anyone that's looking for that little bit of help, absolutely, it could.
Hell yeah,
Um,
can't hurt to talk to anybody. Awesome company. I'll just second plug it, but of course, I'd love to just us shoot the shit as well. Thank you for that, man.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, so, obviously, the I think the natural question then, since you work for a self-publishing school, is A, have you self-published any books, and if so, what were they? And then B, anything in the can on the way?
Good question. Short answer, no and yes, but this is a podcast, so you make everything longer, right? I tell a story behind
These
it.
people have grocery lists to complete, and they've got to listen to something. So,
Give me something to do as I walk around
hmm.
Kroger or Meyer, whatever you have over there. Um, no, I've been wanting to write a book, Walker, for a while. So the answer to the first question, no, but I'm in the process, yes. So when I first joined self-publishing school, I actually applied to be a coach. So I actually, a little bit about our company is you'll talk to a book publishing strategist, make sure that we are a company that's going to help you out, right? You're not looking for someone just to write your book for you. You're looking for something that we, solve, or we fit that
Hmm.
description. And if we work out for you, people get their access to an own membership portal that walks them through, this is what you have to do to write a book. But you also get an expert coach who's been a best-selling author before that you can have conversations with, and they basically coach you when you get stuck in challenges, like ways around those challenges and what you can do to potentially solve them. And I originally applied for that position because I love coaching. I was a coach in my previous job for a really long time, and I've always wanted to write a book. That's the reason I didn't get the job, because I haven't written a fucking book yet.
Gotcha.
But for the longest time, I really have long-term goal of writing a fiction book. I have had different universes playing in my head ever since I can remember. It's one of the big things I just had growing up through my grandparents was just an imagination. So my pipe dream goal would be fiction book of the ages, or just a fiction book people read, and then I get to create my own universe, and someone else gets to get lost in it. Very similar to that I used to, read a bunch of Stephen King books and get lost in his universe. I want the same thing and have people get lost in mine. But man, fiction is tough. Fiction is a tough beast to master. One, to write it. Two, to then try to get it out there and really get a following going with it. So I kind of put that on the back burner as kind of my long-term vision with self-publishing school, is to get full on into fiction writing. First, I wanted to prove concept that I could do it. So I have a nonfiction book that I started at the beginning of this year, and I completed my rough draft about 3 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, man. It doesn't seem it would be big. People are like, oh, get the rough draft done. And the whole time I went into it, I'm like, that's the first step, right? I don't think it's that big of a thing. But once I finished it, I was high-fiving the bartender. I would go to a bar down the street to get my rough draft done when I just wanted some me time. And it was an exhilarating feeling to finish that rough draft.
Yeah, I bet so. Yeah, and the points you bring up about fiction, it's really interesting because I've actually just found myself kind of rediscovering it, as silly as that sounds. As a kid in my 20s, I pretty much only read fiction books. And then which kind of ties into something we were discussing before we started recording, but I read the Game of Thrones books back in the day, right?
But you haven't watched it.
And right. And so I'd be happy to talk about that here in a moment, but that suffice to say that kind of left me a bit soured. And so I actually then came to the conclusion that I didn't care for fiction books anymore, that I was only interested in nonfiction books, and I've read I've read all of Malcolm Gladwell's books. I don't know if you've read him or not.
Yes.
But yeah,
Outliers, right? Anyone?
Say what?
Outliers being a big book for him?
Yeah, The Story of Success. Yes.
Yeah.
Outliers, Blink is another one that he has. David and Goliath, I think, was the most recent one. But I just think that stuff is super fascinating. And I thought, oh, well, this is what I want instead of fiction. And then there's an author named Brandon Sanderson. Are you familiar with him?
I'll Google him on the spot and tell you yes, but to answer your question, honestly, no.
So there's a famous fiction, it's a fantasy series called The Wheel of Time. That was written by a guy named Robert Jordan. Well, I think the series is 12 books, 13 books, something like that. Well, the original author, Robert Jordan, died at book 10. So then Brandon Sanderson came in and finished that series for him. And then he has several fantasy series on his own. And I've had a lot of friends recommend and talk about them over the years, and I was always like, man, I'm over fiction, blah, blah, blah. And then I decided, actually, when I went to Orlando, because I was going to have a lot of flights and layovers and all that stuff, that I should try one of this guy's trilogies on my Kindle. So I did, and yeah, I'm head over heels in love with it. I mean, I probably read for 8 hours this weekend, which is, for me, a significant chunk of time to just sit on the couch and read. And yeah, it's been so nice to rediscover fiction and to have that kind of fun experience in reading something that's not that's not about the way people work, at least not directly, I guess you could say all fiction is that to some extent, right?
100%, man. I think it's this crazy concept of you're able to shut off while also tuning in. When you're reading fiction, it's like, I don't have to think of anything else. I kind of want this escape. I don't have to think of work. I don't think any of this stuff. But what I tell people, my deep desire, and when I talk to people who are thinking of doing fiction, is I think what fiction gives us is a way to let other people get lost in a reality that we've created, get lost in our own thoughts, our own mind, our own wonders, lose themselves for a while, learn something, and then jump out of it and kind of pass that message on. It's like, yeah, it's a weird thing where you can say tune out, but then dive super deep in at the same time.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. Like reading the Kindle is interesting, and it made sense in the nonfiction books. But I've been surprised to see it in this fantasy series, where in the Kindle it'll show you where other readers have highlighted.
Ooh.
Um, so if there's like, I don't know, profound or philosophical, or I don't know what word you would use, but significant or meaningful text, people will highlight that. And it's interesting to see how often that crops up in the fiction book, because to your point, you're like lost in this whole world, and you're not in in the real life anymore. But then you see these statements that speak to a greater truth that exists. You know what I mean? And that does apply to not just that fantasy world. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's like you're deep. I almost look at it as the analogy like you're underwater, super peaceful, right? You can't hear anything, but if you look up, you can still see that other side of it. So it's like you're underwater. You obviously, or you're in the book, and this is all fiction, or it's all quote unquote underwater, but you see something that you can take to the surface. It's like I'm gonna friggin'
Mhm.
take this with me. I mean,
Yeah.
at a deep philosophical or spiritual level, I feel like that's where a lot of religious texts started to get their churn, specifically in the East. I mean, all that stuff is very, like, put across, very allegorical. This huge monkey that lifted the Himalayas, but that can teach us something about conquering the body, conquering the mind. Um, I think there really is something there that people want to take from now fiction books.
Right. Yeah. Actually, that's a really interesting tie-in that you make there with the religious, and I don't mean it as a way to shit on anyone's religion or anything.
Oh,
Anyone that knows
same.
me knows I'm not personally a very religious person, but I will say that I used to be a pretty strong atheist, in that
Hmm.
I thought that religion was like this scourge of humanity, and like I don't know if you've ever listened to Sam Harris.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
I love Sam Harris, but Sam Harris would argue that like religion is like a cancer of people, and I think that there are plenty of examples you can point to where wars have been started, or violent acts, or whatever bad things have been carried out in the name of religion. But I think that becomes more true when you look at it when religion is used as like a political tool, or as like the only basis for how to govern a society. But whenever you look at it in individual basis, you just see some really powerful outcomes that, while I might not be able to get there myself, I certainly can't begrudge someone who can, look in the face of death basically, and still find joy in life through, through the religion, even if maybe it didn't really happen. Like, does it matter? You know what I mean? Does it matter if you're able to extract that value from it? I don't think so.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of people will talk like, did this stuff, is it actually a historical text? I mean, I've talked to some people, in travels in India, that actually believe in giant monkeys and giant elephants that walked around. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Right.
But for the most people that I talk to, it's each one of these gods carried something that we have within ourselves that we can pull out. And then I would then venture to say, I mean, could you say the same thing about most religions? And I really feel
Hmm.
kind of similar to what you're saying. It's like it's the mindset someone has going into it, right? I can see where Sam Harris comes from, and he goes into it as the skeptic, or he goes into it seeing the bad that it's doing. So when you go into it, you're going to see more of that. Oh, this never happened. There's no way it's possible. How the hell did someone make this big of a boat? And we can't, what the hell happened? Where did the dinosaurs go? All this shit. Of course, that's the mindset you're going into it, is you want to prove it's fallacy.
Right.
But yeah, I feel like if you could go into the same text, and I'm not a religious guy at all, very spiritual, but not religious. But if you were to go into a text like the Bible of like, okay, how could I equivalate with, probably thinking of back of lack of a better word, this to something that I'm going through currently.
Right.
Some of you turning the other cheek. Maybe he didn't actually do it, but if that's super beneficial to my life, then it's true for how I want to live that. It doesn't have to be true actually, but it's true for how I want to proceed with it and live my life because of it. There's some
Yeah.
intrinsic meaning there,
Well, and so it kind of something that we had talked a bit about, again off the air, but was kind of this idea of like, what's an important truth that you think is true, but not everyone else seems to observe.
Yeah. What is one important truth
Yeah.
that very few people agree with you on? It's a Peter
Right.
Thiel question. Yeah.
So for me, and I guess I can't say that it's fair that no one agrees with me, because maybe it's very obvious and everyone does, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
Mhm.
And so for me, that is that perception dictates reality. And what I mean by that is that there's reality and there's truth, and truth is objective and reality is subjective. And so based on how you perceive things, you can change how you really, like, the premise of how you could feel about it.
Mhm.
So and so I think that ties into what we're talking about with like the religious stuff, because it's like, it doesn't really matter if objectively something did or didn't happen, if subjectively you can perceive it as such, and then from that extract this meaning or extract this lesson and then apply that and better your own existence for it. Then how much more real could it possibly be, or how much more right could it be?
Exactly. It's right for the 2 feet, the 2 feet that are in the shoes, right? Like you're talking about. And I think, going back what you're saying to preface this whole thing of do people actually agree with you? I think, like, so for me, I would agree with that, right? But I do feel a majority of people will start to hear that and like, well, this is fucking confusing. Can you stop talking, man? Or I don't know if I believe in that. But no, I think a lot of people don't want to go that next layer down, which I think is huge. I mean, I get really off on that concept in general, like what is one important truth. So really what it sounds like you're saying is someone going into the Bible, it's like, if you really have good intentions going into it, even if you believe 100% real, the earth is 4,000 years old or whatever some people believe, but they go into that and say, hey, this is something important. Maybe through their reality, Dillon Barr, think it's weird, but if they're going into it, it gets them to believe what they believe and do the right things that they need to do, then who am I to judge? And I full on agree with that, man. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I would say absolutely so. It's interesting because it's something that you're right. I think people, and probably it's my fault for picking complicated words or something, and that's not my intent. But really, it's the the most basic example, or the most basic phrase that describes that is, like, you're in control of your attitude, right? And now I don't think attitude is directly, a synonym with perception, but it's still basically that kind of idea, that it's where it's like, you can choose how you see these things. And people think that they can't choose their emotions. And while that's true, if you choose how you perceive something, then you kind of establish the baseline of what emotions could happen. Like, if I think that you're an aggressive, mean person, then maybe I could be intimidated by you. But as it stands,
Most people
I think
are.
you're really, I think of you as a very nice and friendly person. And so even if you tried to become hostile or aggressive, like, it would take a while to really bring me back over to that being intimidated. You know what I mean? Because
What do you
it's just
think
not in my
does it?
perception.
What do you think does it? Is your first impression of me that puts it off? Do you think it's something deeper than that? Because you just saying that right there, it makes me think, I'm like, oh, maybe I could be more stern. Because let's say I have the perception of people don't like me right away, which is obviously proved false with your subjective experience there. But what is it that triggers those thoughts for you? You think it's a first impression? Or you think it's just like who you are as a person going into that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that do you mean how do I think I read that from you?
Yeah, how did you read it from me? And then we can maybe
Yeah.
make that
No,
bigger to what you do with other people. I don't want to make it all about
sure.
me. You
No,
are
you're good.
interviewing me, though.
The whole episode is about Dillon Barr. It's in the fucking title, so you're good, my friend.
Yes.
But yeah, I would say, I don't know. For me, I really, and this is a bad answer because it's not replicatable at all. But I just really rely on my intuition. Like when I meet someone within a matter of minutes, I have a judgment on kind of where I think it's going. Now, to my discredit, I have had people before in my life where I was like, that dude makes me feel real uncomfortable, and he hasn't done anything to show me why, but I feel like it's shady. And I continued to be around them for a long time because of employment or whatever, and they never did anything wrong. They never did anything to reinforce my initial impression. So it's not that I'm batting 1,000, I guess, but I don't know. Like, upon meeting you, for example, like there's just maybe it's the amount of eye contact we had. There's just a genuineness and just an openness that you can sense from somebody, and there's not any. And I think the listeners will hear that just from our conversation already. Like, there's just not. Like, even though you and I were in a sales meeting, it didn't feel like there was an objective. And maybe that speaks to some extent to your talent as in that role in sales and things, but I don't think so. I think that it's more about, I think honestly, if anything, the sales training has probably given you the confidence to allow you to be more yourself. So there's not this veil or this veneer that turns out to not really be what it was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man. It just seems like super open, super transparent.
Yeah.
I also been in sales long enough to know that it also pulls out the worst in some people where you're like, you are definitely not telling the truth right now. So that makes me, you're definitely a fucking liar. It does make me think of it, something like further back than that, right? So it's just it's a crazy thing to think on, right? Because it is then your perception. I'm sure even when you have those, when you were around those people that gave you the heebie-jeebies when you first interacted with them, even though they didn't do anything to warrant it, your subjective experience every time after that is like, hey, I'll talk to you, but it's almost like keep you at an arm's length away.
Exactly.
Because it is that subjective experience going into it. It's the end-all argument, right? My buddy and I have this out here whenever we get into this theoretical debate and I'm trying to prove him wrong or he's proven me wrong in a fun way, right? Not to be like, fuck you, but a fun debate. I feel like most debates aren't like that anymore, but we just have fun debates trying to poke holes. The end-all argument is, well, it's all relative.
Yeah.
Because how the hell can I argue that? It's like, damn it, you win, man.
Yeah.
It is. It's how you perceived all this from growing up.
Yep, absolutely. And so for you, what would you say your important truth that very few people agree with you is?
This is why you and I are friends, even though we've met twice, Walker, is because I was getting ready just to segue right into my important truth. I'm like, let me back off. Let me see if he's got anything more he wants to say about it. And then I'm going to tell him mine. No, and it will stick on the religious thing. I think it sticks on some part of what we're talking about here with everything being subjective. But I'm a big believer in balance. So as soon as someone asks me this question, I'm like, okay, it's something with balance. I read the Tao Te Ching, a lot of, Chinese philosophy growing up. So the yin and the yang. I'm just a big overall believer in balance. So then on that tangent, my one important truth is there has to be necessary evil in the world. There has to be necessary bad in the world. Dun, dun, dun. All of your viewers shut off. And not to say that I'm going to take the side of evil, I take the side of bad, but I feel like we need really shitty experiences to really then understand really amazing experiences. And I think the best way to break it down, and again, sorry for any like super religious viewers out there, is I think religion's really good, like I just said. But I'll ask my Christian friends. I just got done asking my dad this, who's super Catholic, the other day, and I say, "Do you believe that God needs the devil?" And then everyone obviously stops talking to me after I say that.
Right.
But I'm like, and this is not to say I'm taking the devil's side, right? But
Sure.
you don't know how great, if you're all knowing, all powerful, you'd end the devil, right? But you don't know how great something or someone or whatever, some entity is, unless you have the other side of the coin to compare it to. So if everything was heaven on earth, I think that would be amazing for 5 years. I think that would be incredible for 50 years. I think that would become purgatory after 5,000 years, if you were to use the Christian vernacular with it. I feel like we wouldn't know up and down because everything was just good. It would lose its meaning. Does that make sense?
It does. So this is actually, it's actually really interesting that's your truth. I'm going
Thank
to
you.
try and
I
tie
think it's
it.
interesting too.
Yeah, well, I say it selfishly because I'm going to tie it to my truth. So
You son of a bitch.
it's only interesting because it relates to me.
Because I can use it.
No, so, and I don't know, I'm interested because I actually haven't had this debate in a long time. So what I'm about to say might not hold water, and if so, that's fine. But I'll be interested to hear your thought on it.
Bring it on.
If it even makes sense. We'll see. So a long time ago, I used to think the exact same thing that you're talking about, and I used to argue that point pretty frequently. That how can you have up without down? How can you have good without bad? Right? Like opposites, to some extent, define one another, so it wouldn't be possible to have it without the opposite, because otherwise, how would you define it? So,
Alan Watts thought for a long time ago, long-time philosopher. Keep going.
Oh, okay. And here I thought I was profound.
You did it. It's all you.
So, Walker Near, folks. You heard it on the Walkshow. So, a long time ago, and I say yin and yang, but now I feel very unsophisticated after you did a yang. So
that could just be me and my.
I'm going to do yin and yang now too.
My subjective experience going into it.
I want to sound smart. So I was looking at yin and yang, and anyway, and so I was telling a friend about that, and he was arguing that that's not correct, that there doesn't have to be this balance. And I said, but if you just look at this symbol, like it just encapsulates the argument so much. Like, how could you have white without the black, or color with no color, whatever you want to say, or a full space without the little dot that makes it not a full space, kind of thing. And he said that in the end, it's still just another example of perception. Now, this does apply specifically to this symbol, I guess, but I think it makes sense, broader. But it's still just perception. That yes, that balance exists, and yes, these opposites exist. However, those are all just perceived things. You perceive the colors and you perceive the lines, and so you could elect to shift your perception, and that balance doesn't have to remain necessarily in order for those things to still be there. It's almost as if we elect those definitions or something. Does that make sense?
No, it does make sense. My brother and I are really, really close. He lives out here as well, and he had a similar argument this past weekend. He was kind of saying, he's like, yeah, but you think a baby's first thought, the very first thought that comes into something's head, it doesn't have anything to compare it to, right? So it is that then perception,
Right.
Which I totally understand. And I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive, right? I think you could have the perception going into something of your bad could be my good. I could be a friggin' psychopath that enjoys killing people, and you think that's the worst thing in the world. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's amazing. Have you tried it? And I think a baby's first thought could be something of total benevolence, right? And that's the purity that came into the world, whatever, something bigger than us created, if you wanted to look at it that way, and it didn't need the other side, and it created it. Or in your friend's example, it's like my blue could be your red, just the way we look at what we think color is.
Right.
I would then just go but I think the next part, because we're put in this reality that we've been put in, is You can think blue's red, you can think red's blue, you can think bad is, your bad is my good, whatever that is. I still think for the viewer of it all, everything after that needs to base itself off of something else. So the overarching, like, who we are when it's all said and done, which, I mean, I wouldn't say I believe in like a heaven or a hell. I think, but I also don't know if the light just shuts off, right? I feel like there's energy can't be created or destroyed. It keeps going, and it probably perceives things differently. Doesn't have any memory of this or recollection, and it just is. But as soon as we get into a world like this, and then, like you said, perception kind of starts, or how you go into it, I think we still create our perception based off of outside factors that then fuel that perception. So it could be one of those chicken or the egg, but I still think at the end of it, you need the balance to then say, well, this is what I believe in, because I don't believe in that. Like if an alien came to our world and could just magically somewhat speak English but not know what things are, and I had to tell him what things are, and maybe he was super good. Perception is he's a great alien. But I show him, I'm like, hey, this is a man. This is a male. He could be like, yeah, great. I don't know what you mean by that. And I could try to like show everything of like, hey, this is his face. This is him naked. That's a penis. That means he's male. It's like, great. The alien's still like, great. I feel like I'd have to show him the other side of it. Well, this is a female. So that's how you know that this is a male. Or this is how what I look is yellow. Why is that yellow? Because, well, these are all the other colors. It's like you need that. That's how I still think it comes. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that I think that it makes a lot of sense, and it's an idea that, like I said, I hadn't actually visited in quite a while, but I think it's interesting, and I don't actually have a point that would really dispute what you've said.
Shouldn't that be what life's all about? Just not having a point when it's all said and done. Just like, fuck it, let's just talk, man.
Trust me, I am on a fucking roll for that, my friend. It's going great. No point here. But yeah, I think that I don't know. I think what you've said is accurate, and I think that, like you said, I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive necessarily. I think that part of it for me, frankly, is that it's kind of scary if what you said is true, because that means in order for something to be super, super crazy dope, then it probably has to suck really, really, really bad. And I don't really want that, right? Like, I don't really want it to suck super bad. And I have a pretty comfortable life, so that might mean, since it hasn't sucked really bad yet, that I've got a big downhill coming, and I'm not looking forward to that either. So,
or it's just you know what I mean? It's just the way that you're back to your perception of, or maybe it's just X amount of bad, but you think of bad as, we were talking before this as well, and I was telling you that I lived in Africa for 2.5 years with my then girlfriend, now fiance. It's like we were out in the thick of it, right? In the rural areas, helping people that have no access to clean water, and they literally walk like 2 to 10 miles a day, no joke, just to get water and bring it back. And I think, again, subjectively, if we were to look at that, we'd be like, well, that's the down tread that I've never experienced, and I got to experience it. It's like, but they look at it as like, yeah, this is kind of flatline for me right now. This isn't super bad. Like, nobody in my family has been like attacked, or nothing's happened here. So I again think it's negative for us, or it's bad for us. I mean, I know some people like in the sales industry, like super bad, and I've been there before. It's like super bad is like 2 weeks without a sale.
Right.
It's like, holy shit, how am I going to recover like earth-shattering event when I was younger? Like, that can be the subjective bad. But like now, right. I'll tell people, do you have a string of a couple, we call them 0 days in the game because he made zero money or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Like if you have a string of those, I mean, feel it, sucks. But that's also what you equate a really good week in sales to. So I do feel there's extremes, and everyone's got their own pendulum, right? So I'm not saying you're down for you got to start walking 10 miles for water now, and that's going to be your downfall. But it'll be bad for you, and then that's what's going to make the good again.
I occasionally like, and it's unfortunate. I guess it speaks to my somewhat pessimistic outlook sometimes. But sometimes when everything's going really great and I don't actually know um, what I would be worried about, I get worried about that because I'm like, it's all going really well, and I don't know that it can just stay like that. So what's coming around the corner that I don't like? Uh,
It's almost like
and
that
that,
humility aspect of like, oh gosh, it's great
right?
now, but it's gonna suck.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
I've had that same thing at certain points growing up where I was like used to thinking really bad thoughts, and then I was feeling good for a bit, and I'm like, wait, this feels weird. I should be upset right now, right? Because
Hmm.
typically my stream of consciousness has been negative. So the change aspect of it, I don't know. I think it can definitely humble us so we don't get overly cocky. And I definitely think that it can boost us at times. Like if you look at like the ego, I think the good part about the ego is it can boost us when we're like, we just feel like the earth sucks. It's like, no, I can get through this. It's finding that healthy middle ground, which
Yeah,
is tough, right? Because like part of me wants to tell you, yeah, there's going to be bad stuff getting ready to happen, but it's like walk the line though, right? You know it's going to happen. You can walk the line. You can experience it. You can jump back to the middle ground. Something really good happens, you'll be able to fully experience and then jump back to the middle ground. And I think that is just the almighty journey we're all trying to figure out. And it's super fucking difficult.
I know. Yeah, right. Like on the one hand, there's this notion that, like you just said, where like I'm a big Kobe Bryant fan, and when he was playing in the NBA, he would talk about how the secret to his continued success was he didn't he didn't get too high on the highs and he didn't get too low on the lows. So it's exactly what you're talking about, where he's always trying to stay kind of in that middle. Um, and that makes sense. But then on the other side of the coin, it's like, but isn't it also cool in life to like experience some like super thrilling kind of high riding thing? And if so, then you don't always want to be in the middle, right? Because if you're always in the middle, then do you ever really get to experience that mind blowing thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, gosh, and this the can of worms
Oh yeah,
opens
for
right
sure.
now, right? And I think it's, I mean, because I've thought the same thing before. I was known that back in my beginning sales career, I used to sell books door to door. That was an internship that I did for 5 fucking years, where I would go to a different state and knock on people's houses and try to sell them educational books for their kids.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, fucking loser. No,
I
but
wouldn't say that. That's just definitely some commitment.
it was, and it's put me where I am now, and different ways to look at it, and there's also super big negatives that'll come from it, like we've been talking about this whole time. But
Sure.
when I was selling, that's what people said they knew me for. It's like really great day, even keel, really low day, even keel, and I really liked it back then, and I'll still be at times of like, have I lost that? But then I like going full into an experience. I'm like, this sucks. I'm gonna throw something. I want. It's almost like part of me wants to feel it,
Right.
and then it's like you have a little bit of a high. It's like, yeah, I want to feel this. Feels really good. And then finding the middle grounds. It's not like you have to live there, but I feel like if you live, it's weird, man. I feel like I'm almost going against myself. If you live in any of the areas, it's just kind of flatline. I guess like a great middle ground would be kind of walking that rope, that middle, but not being afraid to jump to both sides. Don't beat yourself up if you go too far on the quote unquote bad side, and don't get lost in desire and ecstasy if you go too far to the good side, because you're going to lose yourself there. But it's like, know that you need to come back.
Well, I think it's kind of that saying, take all things in moderation, even moderation, right? So it's
That's a
it's
good one. Is
exactly what you're just
that a
saying, right?
Walkshow exclusive?
It's it is now. Yeah, it is now. TM people, there's a little trademark emblem after I say that each time. If anyone else would like to use it, you can send checks to Walker at the walkshowpodcast.com.
I'll take any money too if you're out of it. I mean, I have
Sure,
nothing.
sure.
If
Yeah,
you're going
I
to listen to
will.
this, send me money too.
Yeah, I'll forward all the internet money that we make to you. The dozens of listeners that we have really keep the lights on around here.
we
So
appreciate we appreciate your blood, sweat, and tears, listeners. Thank you. Keep
yeah,
listening. Keep tuning in.
basically, thanks, mom. So
I'll tell my mom too, man. We can have our
thank
moms
you. Yeah,
listen to
we'll have
this.
two listeners this time.
What the
I
fuck
love
are
it.
they talking about?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I've got just real quickly. I was going to ask you, and these are a little bit generic, but just to kind of gauge, just or get to know you a little better.
Hmm.
Um, as far as, and these can be very brief answers. I know they can be very long conversations, but like what kind of music do you find yourself listening to?
Oh, yes. I like this. Yeah, I hate when you ask someone this and you're in the car and you're like, "What do you listen to?" "Oh, anything." And then you fucking play something and they obviously don't like it. Uh, I would say, I listen really to anything. No, I would say the big music that I like. I'm not even alternative rock. Maybe I'm a big
Okay.
Dispatch fan. Uh, Got the Van is probably one of my favorite live. Um, I heard I would like String Cheese Incident if I went to one of their live shows. But I also like a lot of spiritual stuff, man. I'm super hippie, woo woo, kind of weird there. Not going medicine for the people. Trevor Hall, Modest Yahoo, Tribal Seeds, Revolution, all that stuff. And then every once in a while, if I'm trying to feel a little like upbeat or hype, I'll listen to like some electronic music like
Awesome.
Kygo, Grizz, Pretty Lights, shit like that.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, it sounds like a pretty diverse taste in what you're checking
Yeah,
out.
I'll do bluegrass. It's like just super country is kind of boring to me. Like I listened to rock for a really long time, but I can only listen to so much. And then like hardcore heavy metal, never really struck with me.
Yeah, I'm in an interesting space where my favorite musical thing, whether you want to call it a band, an act, a performance, whatever, but my favorite musical thing of all time is hands down Tool. Um,
Okay.
which gets
Well, you're
put
dead
in
to me,
that
so get me off
yeah,
the show.
well, it
Just
gets put in
kidding.
that category of like heavy metal, but I would argue that it is far from that. Um, it's almost like if electronic music was played with rock instruments. Like
Okay.
it's it's really interesting with the different timings that they use and just I'm not a musician, so I can't even speak in the technical terms that well, but just I don't know. It doesn't sound like traditional rock music at all, to me at least. And it doesn't. It there is screaming sometimes, but it's not. It's not that like I won't even try and do it because God forbid anyone would have to listen to that. But it's not that like really heavy, just like rah, just evil scream. It's like singing, and
Like a
so
Linkin
there's
Park
yeah,
some of
but
their early stuff.
yeah, I mean,
I'm gonna
anyone that
listen to them now,
anyone
Walker. You
that's a
know that,
Tool
right?
fan with me would assault me for comparing Tool to Linkin Park. But yeah, it's kind of I see where you're going with that
You
and see
heard
what.
it here first, folks. TM, that is a Walk Show exclusive. Lincoln Park is the same as Tool.
Oh man. Well, luckily I've got in the works. We've got an episode that's all about Tool, so the listeners will know exactly what I think about Tool because they have a show coming up in the middle of May that I'm going to go see. So really excited about that.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Now I
well,
know a little bit more about you.
yeah, there you go. And like I say, well, I guess I didn't really elaborate on that. So just quickly, yeah, Tool's my favorite musical thing of all time, but I don't like almost any other rock music. Like it's very rare that I get into it. Beyond that, I listen to mostly electronic stuff,
Okay.
and then I also listen to a bit of rap and hip hop type stuff. Um, don't really do country. Don't really do, yeah, like I said, don't really do a lot of rock.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
can see that. There'll still be times I'll get in like the rap. There's just a lot of times I'll listen to it. I'm like, and I'm one of those people that can like easily memorize lyrics for some reason. It's a stupid fucking talent that I have. And I'll start rapping. And it's like part of me's listening to myself, but the other part of me's not. And I'm just singing. It's like the part of me that's listening to myself singing. I'm like, what the fuck is this guy saying? Like,
Right.
what are you subjectively, your perception, creating your own reality? Like, what the hell are you going to bring into it if you keep saying like things like this out loud?
Right.
But it gets me hyped sometimes. And so that's the part of me that's singing. I'm like, you don't understand what I'm feeling right now. Dylan, this is just me.
Yeah.
I'm schizophrenic.
Yeah, I heard, so I watched this interview with Eminem and he talked about how hip hop gave him confidence, especially when he was a kid, grew up in a bad neighborhood or whatever, and how rap and hip hop kind of made him feel bulletproof, if you will, even though obviously it doesn't. And I would, I didn't grow up in that kind of situation at all, but I would agree that even as a 35-year-old man now, I get that same thing from it. Like, like even if I need to like go mow the yard, I'm gonna put on some rap music so I can bust that out. You know what I mean? Because it just gives me that.
I'm gonna fuck this lawn up. You want that mindset going into
dude,
it.
I'm probably gonna cut a bunch of it off. That's kind of some dangerous shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, Dillon, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today. I hope that we can continue this conversation another time on maybe another episode.
I am in. We'll talk about death in one of these, huh? Just to make people listening feel super uncomfortable.
Yeah, we're gonna do what we'll do is an episode all about cancer.
Perfect.
And the horrors that it exacts upon people. Yeah, that'll be good. No, man, it has been super interesting. And like I said, at the beginning of the show, it was an absolute pleasure and delight to meet you in Orlando. And I'm really glad that you agreed to come on. Self-Publishing School is the website. Again, we'll have that in the show notes, and I'll repeat it in the closing. But if you'd like to, what is that website one more time?
Self-publishingschool.com. We just revamped it, so
okay.
Go in there, look at some stuff. We got amazing blog content in there that if people are actually thinking about it. Yeah, maybe you want to write a book and you don't need any help, but it could be cool to have a blog or a place that you can go. Give it a look. It's awesome stuff.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Dillon. Thanks everyone for listening, and have a good one. That is going to do it for today's show. Thank you again, Dillon Barr, for joining the show today. And again, guys, that is self-publishingschool.com, where you can check out the work that Dillon's doing. Always, you can email any comments, questions you've got to walker@thewalkshowpodcast.com. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a good one.